Have you ever loved something so much you just couldn't give it up, but had to hide it because the person you loved wouldn't accept it? That's exactly how I felt, and this story starts with romance novels. Ever since I was a kid, I've loved books. But not just any books. Sai was obsessed with romance novels. The trashier, the more dramatic, the more ridiculous, the better. On long, exhausting days, I'd pull up the blankets, open a new book, and suddenly the world around me would vanish. One might be a 29-year-old office worker in real life, but in those pages, I was a heroine, living adventures with characters I adored. For the 2 years I dated him, my boyfriend, 30, I learned to hide this obsession, not because I was ashamed, but because he was uncomfortable with it. At first, I didn't get it. Some of the books were harmless, just romantic, sometimes over the top, but nothing really scandalous. Yet every time he caught me smiling at a romantic scene, I could see it in his eyes, a crease of disapproval, a judgment I couldn't quite ignore. I remember the first time he said it. "You can't read those books when I'm around. It makes me uncomfortable." I blinked, confused, but it's just books. Nothing bad in them. He sighed, looking serious. "Maybe, but it makes me feel less, like not enough, you know." I tried not to overreact. I thought maybe it was temporary, or that he just wasn't used to it. I started reading only when he was at work, when I was alone in my room, or at a cafe with a book in hand. Over time, I learned to limit myself. Fi loved it, yes, but I also loved him. I thought compromise was part of any relationship, but when we started talking about living together, I realized things would change. For the first time, I pictured our shared apartment, a place where I could line up all my beloved books on the shelves, where friends could visit and see the living room overflowing with my stories. I felt excited. I imagined the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, my books neatly arranged like an extension of my life, and I felt proud of my hobby. Then he confused me again. During a discussion about decorating, he stopped, looked at me seriously, and said, "I don't want those books on the shelves. Not in the living room, not in the bedroom. Nowhere anyone can see." I laughed lightly, thinking he was joking. But he wasn't. His eyes were serious, his voice calm yet firm. "I feel embarrassed when people see them. It makes me feel like you're less intelligent, and I, not good enough." A surge of anger mixed with confusion ran through me. Really, it's just books. Harmless ones. I thought about his habits. He watched porn without shame or feeling inadequate. So why was it different for me to read romance novels? I opened my mouth. "You watch porn, but you don't feel less than, right? Why is it different with my books?" He shook his head, serious. "No, it's different." I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to argue, explain, defend my personal freedom. Another part of me sank, realizing this was his genuine feeling, and he couldn't see the parallel with himself. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay in bed, a new book in my hands, but didn't open it because every glance at it reminded me of his serious gaze. I wondered, am I wrong? Is he overreacting? And can we live together while still keeping our hobbies and respecting each other? In my mind, the question kept looping. It wasn't just about books. It was about personal freedom, about feeling acknowledged and loved, about learning to understand and compromise. I realized that what seemed like a trivial issue, these little books, was actually a major test for our relationship, and that's where it all began. Our future apartment was still just an idea in my mind, but I had already begun imagining everything: the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, a soft armchair, and bookshelves filled with all the novels I loved. I wanted every corner of the apartment to reflect my personality, even the trashy romance novels I was obsessed with. But he, with his usual serious demeanor, shattered all those imaginations during the very first conversation about moving in together. "I don't want those books anywhere," he said, calm but firm. "But they're just books," I tried to explain, keeping my voice steady. He shook his head. "No, I can't accept it. They embarrass me. I don't want anyone to see them." I felt my heart race. There was something in his tone that made me realize this wasn't just a normal annoyance. It was deeper, a matter of self-worth, of feeling not good enough. "Are you saying I make you feel not good enough when I read?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. He looked at me, tension in his eyes. "Yes, I feel that way. When you read these books, I feel not smart enough, not important enough. I know it sounds strange, but I can't shake this feeling." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "What about when you watch porn? Do you feel not good enough then?" "No, it's different," he replied, voice steady but with a hint of embarrassment in his eyes. "You don't understand. It's different." A hot wave of frustration and disappointment surged through me. "Different? How is it different? I'm just reading romance novels. It doesn't involve anyone else. It doesn't affect you at all." He turned to the window, seemingly trying to contain his emotions. I could see his hands clenching, his breath slightly uneven. "I don't know. I just don't want anyone to see you reading these books," he said, voice quieter, almost like confessing to himself in that moment. I realized the problem wasn't the books, it was his insecurities, his shame, his self-doubt. I took a deep breath, trying to approach him logically but gently. "Honey, I understand how you feel, but I think you're linking my reading with judging yourself. I read books not to compare or make you feel lesser. It's just my hobby, my way to relax. It doesn't diminish your worth at all." He looked back at me, eyes still serious but softer. "I know, but I still feel uncomfortable. It bothers me. I don't want to live together and see it every day." We were both silent for a while. I looked down at the book in my hands, feeling both frustrated and heartbroken. I had spent 2 years accommodating him, reading secretly, keeping my passion hidden, but now, as we prepared to live together, everything became more tangible. The freedom I had imagined for our future apartment suddenly felt like a barrier, thing I couldn't fully have if I wanted to maintain the relationship. I tried a different approach. "Gentler this time, if you want. I can keep the books in my room, not in the living room. No one besides us would know. It's just a way for me to enjoy my hobby and for you to stay comfortable." He shook his head again, firmly. "No, I don't want the books anywhere in the house. Even if no one else sees, it still makes me uncomfortable." A wave of confusion washed over me. I couldn't understand why a harmless hobby of mine could provoke such a strong reaction. "Do you know I feel restricted?" I asked, my voice slightly trembling. "I feel like I can't be myself around you. I love you, but I also need to be me." He lowered his head in silence. I noticed a flicker of guilt, but the insecurity was still there. The gap between us wasn't just about books, it was about emotions, self-esteem, and personal freedom. We both realized this wasn't an ordinary argument. This was an emotional battle where both of us were hurt, both trying to protect ourselves. I looked around the empty room, imagining our future apartment, and suddenly felt the weight of it all. My personal satisfaction and his emotional safety both were important. But now, they seemed to be in direct conflict that night. I sat on the bed, the new book open but unread. I listened to soft music from my phone, felt my own steady breathing, and wondered, am I wrong? Is he being overly sensitive, or am I being selfish? How can I enjoy my hobby while respecting his feelings? The question kept looping in my mind like an endless stream. I realized that a seemingly small hobby had suddenly become a major test for our relationship. And from here, everything started to become more tense. That night, the air in the room felt heavy, almost thick. The soft yellow light from the table lamp cast shadows on the wall, highlighting the two of us sitting across from each other yet feeling an enormous distance. I held the book in my hands, my fingers trembling slightly. He stood up, paced a few steps, then stopped, hands on his hips, eyes both tired and tense. I don't understand, he said, voice low but sharp. You think it's harmless, but to me, it's not. It makes me feel inadequate. I feel not smart enough, not important enough. I exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm, but my voice trembled. When you say that, it makes me feel judged. I don't understand why a harmless hobby makes you feel this way. I love you, but I also need to be myself. Just because I read, you feel less than. Is that fair? He closed his eyes, clenching his fists. I could see the conflict in his eyes, self-doubt, anger, shame, all at once. He opened his eyes and looked straight at me. You don't understand. It's different. I can't explain. I just know every time you read, I feel uncomfortable, and I don't know what to do. I stood up, moving toward him, raising my voice slightly but still controlled. Do you know how it feels for me? For 2 years, I've had to hide my hobby because it bothers you. I've learned to compromise, read in secret, even disguise my emotions so you wouldn't notice. I don't want to do that anymore. This is my freedom, my small joy, and you're taking it away. A heavy silence filled the room. I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but also confusion. I don't want to do that. I just can't escape the feeling. I laughed bitterly, a mix of sadness and frustration. You can't escape the feeling, yet you want me to give up my hobby. Do you think that's fair? He lowered his head, silent. I sighed, tears welling up not out of anger, but out of helplessness. We were standing on opposite edges of the same relationship, unable to reach each other. I raised the book, voice trembling. I don't understand why I have to hide myself, change myself, just to make you comfortable. I want to live together, but I don't want to lose myself in the process. He stepped closer, voice low. I know. I don't want you to change. But every time I see you read, I feel small. I see your happiness, and I don't know where I fit in that happiness. Those words felt like a knife to my heart. I froze, unsure how to respond. I realized his feelings weren't really about the books, they were about insecurity, fear, and worry about losing his place in my heart. But I also knew I couldn't endure this restriction forever. You know, I said slowly, every word heavy, you don't need to feel inadequate. You don't have to compare yourself to my books. They don't take away your worth. They're just a small part of my life, and I want you to accept that. I don't want to hide myself anymore. Do you understand? He lowered his gaze, silent for a moment, then let out a quiet sigh. The room was still. Only the ticking clock and my racing heart could be heard. I saw a hint of softness in his eyes, a small opening, but the trace of insecurity remained. I stepped closer, placing my hand on his shoulder. Honey, I know it bothers you. I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't want to lose myself. We have to find a way to coexist with each other's emotions. You can't control everything, and I can't always compromise. He took a deep breath, voice trembling. You can keep the books in your room, but I'll still feel uneasy every time I see them. I'll try, but I can't promise anything. I nodded, both relieved and heartbroken. I know, I don't need you to promise, just to try to understand. We'll find a way together, but we both knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of a long journey, where emotions, personal freedom, and love would constantly collide and be tested. We had experienced our first emotional climax, but the tension still hung in the air like a shadow following us everywhere, all night. I lay in bed, the book open but unread, listening to his breathing from the next room. I wondered, can I keep my hobby and still keep him? Can he learn to accept it without letting his insecurities control our relationship? There was no immediate answer, but one thing was clear. Love isn't just about feelings, it's about challenges, patience, and understanding. And we had just stepped into a new, emotionally charged trial, where every choice would shape both our futures. That morning, the room was bathed in sunlight. Soft golden rays streamed through the curtains, hitting the wooden floor and creating thin lines of light on the walls. Birds chirped outside, blending with the gentle music playing on my phone, forming a peaceful atmosphere, as if all tension had drifted away. Yet inside me, the feeling of chaos remained. I sat on the bed, hugging a pillow, sipping hot coffee, reflecting on last night's argument. Looking at the books on the table, a small wave of discomfort arose. They were my joy, yet now they had become the source of his unease. I wondered, am I being selfish? Or is he being overly sensitive? I picked up a newly purchased book, flipped a few pages without reading, letting my fingers glide over the paper. I could feel the soothing texture, yet the pain from our argument still lingered in my heart. I remembered the past 2 years, all the times I hid my hobby, the anxious looks when he saw me reading. I realized I had compromised too much, trading personal freedom to maintain peace in the relationship, to release the chaotic thoughts. I began writing in my journal. He feels inadequate, but that has nothing to do with me. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just love books. I love these small moments of relaxation. But why has it become so difficult? I love him, yet I also need to keep myself while writing. I realized this anxiety was not just personal, it was the fear of losing the relationship, the challenge of learning to compromise while keeping one's identity. I flipped through old notes, recalling past arguments over small things, movies, even snacks. Each time I recognized one truth: in love, compromise is not always the best solution if it means losing yourself. In the next room, I imagined him sitting in silence. He lowered his head, staring out the window, hand under his chin. I could clearly picture the insecurity in his eyes, an insecurity he didn't know how to express. He wondered, why does she read these books without considering my feelings? Why does a small hobby make me feel inadequate? The distance between us wasn't just physical, but emotional and mental. I realized that both of us wanted to understand each other, but didn't know the right approach. I thought about the way he looked at me last night, eyes both angry and ashamed, and my heart softened. Despite the frustration and disappointment, I still loved him. Understanding that love is not just about feelings, but also patience and understanding. All morning, I sat gazing out the window, watching leaves sway in the wind, listening to birds and subtle surrounding sounds. I felt a lightness from nature, as if reminding me that everything has a solution. I told myself, we need time. Both of us need time to learn acceptance, to learn how to coexist. When he appeared in the kitchen to make coffee, I noticed a change in his eyes. The intense tension from last night was gone, replaced with quietness, slight embarrassment, but also a hint of softness. I smiled, trying to speak gently. Hey, last night, I know I got a bit tense, but I want us to try understanding each other more, not to argue anymore. He nodded lightly, silent. I continued softly. I don't want to hide my hobby anymore, but I also don't want to hurt you. Maybe we need a middle ground. I want to try to, you want to try to. He took a deep breath, voice shaky but warmer. I'll try to understand better. We can attempt to compromise, but I still need time to adjust. I nodded, feeling partly relieved. This conversation didn't solve everything, but it opened a door of hope. We both realized no one is entirely right or wrong, just differences in perception and reaction that evening. I opened the book and read a few pages, not in secret, but quietly, fully present. I placed the book beside the bed as a reminder. This is part of me, and love is equally important. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and realized that peace can come from small steps, understanding, timely compromise, and patience in my mind. The question still lingered. Can we keep hobbies and still love each other? Can he learn to accept without letting insecurities control our relationship? But instead of fear, I felt a gentle motivation. Everything can be resolved if both of us listen and learn to understand each other. Golden light at day's end streamed through the curtains, shining on the floor, carrying a rare sense of peace. I smiled, knowing the journey ahead is still long. But for now, we are walking together, pausing to reflect and prepare for the next challenge. The first day of testing compromise began quietly, as if both of us were mentally preparing for a gentle battle. I decided to place my romance novels in a large box, secured with a rubber band, temporarily preventing them from appearing in the living room. He left the room and returned after a few minutes, eyes examining the box. Okay, looks a bit better, he said, slightly embarrassed, but I still feel a little uncomfortable. I smiled, keeping my voice gentle. You'll get used to it. This is just the first step. I promise not to leave books scattered around the living room anymore, even with care. The real challenge began in the evening when we watched a movie together on the sofa. Sitting beside him, I tried lifting the box under the coffee table. He glanced at it, frowning. You brought it out again. I thought, leave it in the corner. I sighed, thinking, this is why compromise is so hard. But I smiled. Yeah, it's fine. Just temporary. Don't worry. As the movie began, he looked at me quietly. I know. I'm being too sensitive, but I still feel uncomfortable. I don't want to pressure you, but the feeling doesn't go away. I held his hand gently. Honey, I understand. I also feel awkward having to hide my hobby. Let's try together, step by step, that night. We reorganized the living room and bedroom, placing the books in my room, creating a safe zone for my hobby. At one point, he looked at me and smiled awkwardly. I never thought arranging books could be so complicated. I giggled, feeling relief. Yeah, who knew? Even romance novels need strategic placement. The next morning, I noticed he had placed a few of my other books in the box, as if learning to accept. I tried this to make it easier for both of us, he said, shyly, but with softer eyes. I'm not sure, but I'll try. We both laughed lightly. After continuous tension, this was a rare moment of shared effort, both participating in the challenge, rather than just enduring or arguing. In the following week, the challenge wasn't just about books, but also emotions and communication. Whenever I opened a book, he still felt uncomfortable, but instead of anger, he learned to express his feelings gently. I feel a bit uneasy when you read, but are you okay? I smiled. It's okay. Just tell me how you feel, and we'll face it together. We started a language of compromise. When he felt uneasy, he spoke calmly. When I wanted to read, I respected his feelings and found my own space. Gradually, tension eased, giving way to peaceful, happy moments. One evening, preparing dinner, I noticed him glancing at the box. I decided to tease him. You know, these books might make you smarter. He raised his eyebrows, but his eyes twinkled with amusement. Oh, really? Maybe I should try reading them. We laughed together, the sound filling the small kitchen. I realized then, compromise isn't just giving in, it's about turning challenges into shared joy. But not everything was perfect. One evening, I accidentally left a book out. He saw it and frowned. You left it here again? I feel uncomfortable. I sighed, slightly frustrated, but calm. Sorry, I forgot. I'll put it back right away. We tidied up together, and he whispered, I know. I should control my feelings better, but you know it's not easy. I nodded, silently grateful for his effort. This challenge wasn't just about books, it was about understanding, patience, and learning to resolve conflicts together. After a few weeks, we realized the compromise challenge brought valuable lessons. One weekend, sitting together, reading and drinking tea, he turned to me, eyes serious but warm. I know. I still feel uneasy sometimes, but I've learned to accept it, and I'm happy seeing you happy. I smiled, placing my hand over his. Me too. I'm glad we're learning to understand each other better. Knowing love isn't always perfect, but we're trying together. In that moment, I realized compromise isn't the end, but a continuous journey where both learn to love, respect, and adjust. And though challenges remain ahead, at least now, we know we can overcome disagreements if we make the effort together. The following week, we decided to invite a few close friends over for a casual evening with food and wine. I wanted to show off our new apartment, and he, though a bit reluctant, agreed. I had prepared everything perfectly. The living room was tidy. My books were safely tucked into a box, warm lights glowed, and soft music played in the background. As soon as the friends arrived, the atmosphere became lively. Laughter and chatter filled the room, but I noticed he seemed a bit tense, his eyes constantly flicking toward the box of books. He lowered his head, exhaling lightly. as if reminding himself to stay calm. One of my friends, Megan, noticed. "Oh, whose books are these? They look interesting." I glanced at him and saw a slight frown, but I smiled. "Oh, those are mine. I enjoy reading romance and fantasy books." Immediately, I felt the subtle shift in the room's energy. He sat up straighter, lightly holding my hand, whispering, "I don't want them out too much, you know." I nodded gently. "I know, don't worry. They're in the box. No one will see them except us." Megan grinned mischievously. "Oh really? That sounds fun." Fantasy romance is always dramatic and full of feelings. I smiled, but kept an eye on him. He turned away, taking a deep breath. I could clearly sense the unease in his reaction. It wasn't that he disliked my friends or MIT, was the fear of social judgment. Throughout the evening, a few conversations inadvertently touched on my hobby. A friend mentioned a romance book she'd read, and Megan exclaimed, "Oh, fantasy romance is so exciting. I didn't expect you'd like that genre," he muttered under his breath. "Don't feel comfortable." I placed my hand over his, gently reassuring. "Honey, it's okay. We've prepared everything." Still, I could see that the external social pressure was amplifying the tension, making the compromise challenge even harder. He wanted to accept my hobby but feared judgment and losing face in front of friends. After our friends left, the apartment was quiet again, just the two of us. He sighed, leaning back on the sofa, holding a cup of tea. I sat next to him, placing my hand on his. "Are you okay today?" He looked tired but soft. "I'm okay, but I don't know how long I can handle it if every outing brings this pressure." I exhaled, understanding that social pressure was a greater challenge than just tidying books or arranging space. "Honey, I know. We can't avoid social pressures, but we can learn to support each other and understand each other's feelings." He lowered his head, lightly holding my hand. "I'll try. I know you don't want to do anything wrong, and I don't want to over-control. Just need time to get used to it." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the ticking clock and the faint breeze through the window. I realized that our relationship was tested not only by personal emotions, but also by outside pressures. The following week, the social challenge continued. One evening, I went book shopping with friends while he stayed home. When I returned, he asked softly, "Did anyone comment on your hobby today?" I smiled. "No, everyone respected it. But you see, I understand your pressure, right?" He nodded, eyes glinting with understanding. "Yeah, I know. I'll try to manage my feelings so you don't worry." We laughed together. As a way to release tension and remind ourselves that love isn't just about overcoming internal conflicts, it's also about handling external social pressures together. During this time, I realized some important lessons. One evening, while sitting and reading together, he looked at me gently. "I know, social pressures will still come up, but I'll try not to let them control me. I want you to be happy." I placed my hand over his, smiling. "Me too. And I know that as long as we stand together, any challenge will feel lighter." In that moment, I understood that we were not only overcoming personal conflicts, but also learning to face social pressures together. And although many challenges still lay ahead, for now, we knew that true love is about understanding, accepting, and walking through difficulties hand in hand. Everything seemed fine, but one evening, the real crisis hit. I came home after a long day, carrying a newly purchased book. Before I could even put it away, he appeared from the living room. His eyes were serious, his voice shaky. I can't take it anymore. Every time I see you reading that book, I feel like I'm not enough. I froze, my heart racing. This was the first time he admitted his fears so directly. I tried to stay calm. Honey, I've been trying to compromise, keeping my books in my own room, respecting your feelings. But I can't give up my hobby just to make you happy. He squeezed my hand, his voice hoarse. I know, but I still feel uncomfortable. I love you, but this feeling is just too heavy. The space between us felt stretched. Each breath weighted. I stepped closer, looking straight into his eyes. Listen. Love isn't about hiding who we are or giving up what makes us happy. We're trying to make this work together, but if you can't learn to accept it, we're going to have bigger problems. He lowered his head, tears streaming down. I had never seen him so vulnerable. This was the moment when our emotions hit their peak, where love, personal freedom, and insecurity collided most sharply. I'm scared of losing you. I don't want you to be sad, but seeing you happy with that book, I feel small. I took a deep breath, trying to control my own emotions. I'm not going anywhere, but I also can't live hiding a part of myself. If you truly love me, you'll learn to accept it. We sat in silence. The clock ticked steadily, a reminder that every second counted. I sat down, holding his hand gently. We're here together in this storm. You need to learn to manage your insecurities, and I'll practice patience. But if we don't change, this challenge could destroy our relationship. He lifted his head, eyes red and worried. I don't want to lose you. I'll try. But you have to understand, this feeling isn't easy to deal with. I placed my hand on his shoulder, softly. I understand. I'm scared of losing you too, but we have to face this together. This is the biggest challenge we've ever had. And if we get through it, our love will be stronger than ever. We sat quietly, our hearts seemingly beating in sync. The light from the desk lamp cast soft golden streaks on the wall. In that moment, all tension, anxiety, and insecurity blended together, but it was also when love and patience were tested the hardest that night. Neither of us slept well. I could hear his breathing beside me, feel his rapid heartbeat. I knew we were both wrestling internally. I between keeping my personal passions and love, he between insecurity and the desire to accept. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, bringing a sense of relief. We sat side by side, drinking tea, looking at each other without words. This silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding and companionship. He spoke softly, his tone warm but low. I know. I'll learn to accept. I don't want to feel small in your eyes anymore. I smiled, placing my hand over his. I'll be patient too. We just went through the biggest challenge ever, and I believe that as long as we face it together, nothing can break this love. It was a turning point. This serious crisis didn't end with conflict or arguing. It ended with awareness, empathy, and determination to get through it together. We realized that challenges aren't meant to be avoided. They're meant to teach us how to love, accept, and be patient like never before. That evening, we sat side by side, reading and chatting about little things, laughing together. The warm golden light, the ticking clock, and our synchronized breathing all merged into a comforting rhythm. I realized that a crisis can be an opportunity to understand each other more deeply, and the biggest challenge had become a stepping stone for a stronger relationship. After that serious crisis, we both realized that facing our emotions, insecurities, and personal interests head-on was crucial for keeping our relationship strong. I started figuring out how to balance my personal hobbies with his emotional needs, while he learned to accept things, ease social pressure, and understand that my love for reading didn't reflect on his worth. That morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, creating thin stripes across the wooden floor. I sat in the armchair, sipping my coffee and gazing out the window, watching him tidy up the living room. I couldn't help but giggle when I saw him carefully stacking my book boxes into the corner. "You're taking this seriously, huh?" I teased. He turned around with an awkward smile. "Yeah, don't you see, I'm trying to compromise." "This isn't as easy as it looks," he replied. I placed a hand on his shoulder and laughed. "You're doing great, and I love that you're joining in." We started a new week with our own balance rules. I could read in my room or when he was out, and he could share his feelings whenever he felt insecure, without fear of judgment. At first, it was a bit tricky, but over time, it became natural. One evening, I decided to try another balancing step, inviting him to read the new romance book I'd fallen in love with. I knew it would be challenging for him, but it also felt like a chance to grow closer. "I want you to read a chapter with me," I said softly. He raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "I'm not sure, you know. But okay, let's give it a shot." We sat side by side, opened the book, and began reading. At first, he was hesitant, muttering under his breath as he flipped through the pages. "Oh, they're kissing again." I chuckled and nudged him lightly. "You have to read the whole chapter, follow the story." After a few minutes, he started paying attention, listening to the humorous and romantic details. I realized that even the awkward first moments could turn into joy if both of us were patient and open-minded beyond reading. We also worked on balancing our emotions in daily life. When I wanted to go out with friends or attend a book club, he no longer showed jealousy or discomfort. Instead, he asked genuinely, "Who are you going with today? I want to hear all about it later." I smiled, noticing his growth in handling emotions. Instead of feeling anxious or insecure, he learned to engage partially and respect my personal space. On my end, I also learned to pace myself. Instead of reading constantly, I chose appropriate times so as not to overwhelm him. I even began sharing some funny or interesting snippets from books, making him laugh and gradually sparking his curiosity. We discussed characters, funny plot points, and sometimes even created our own playful versions of the story, which lightened the mood. One evening, we tried another small experiment, placing a tiny bookshelf in the corner of the living room, just enough to display a few of my favorite books without being too obvious. He stood there, furrowed his brow slightly, but then nodded. "Okay, but only a few." "I don't want it to be too visible," he said. I giggled, agreed. Perfect balance. Through these experiments, I realized something important. Balance isn't about giving in completely. It's about walking alongside each other, respecting each other's feelings, and creating space for individuality. Another special moment was preparing dinner together. I teased him, "You know, I think you're about to become a fantasy romance fan." He laughed, shaking his head. "Don't be ridiculous, but you're actually making me curious." We laughed together, and I realized that humor was an essential part of balancing emotions and easing conflicts. In the days that followed, finding balance became easier. We read together, discussed stories, cleaned together, and laughed at the silly romantic moments. External pressures faded, because we had learned to protect each other's feelings and face every situation with empathy. By the weekend, we sat side by side on the armchair, afternoon light streaming through the windows. I exhaled a sigh of relief. "I never thought we could balance everything like this," I said. He took my hand, his eyes warm. "Me neither. I've learned that not every insecurity is real. And honestly, I enjoy seeing you happy." I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder, feeling our hearts sink. Balance wasn't just about arranging books or timing my reading it was about growing together, respecting one another, and loving in a more mature, mindful way. Everything seemed balanced, but the real challenge came from an unexpected source: friends, family, and social pressures. One Friday evening, I got a call from my old best friend, Jenny. "Hey, we're having a little get-together at Anna's place. Can you come?" I happily agreed, but he sat silently beside me as I set the phone down. His eyes flickered with worry, as if he could already predict all the possible scenarios. "Are you sure about this? I'm worried tonight might be uncomfortable," he said. "Babe, I'll only be there for a little while. I'll be back with you soon," I reassured him. But as soon as I stepped into the party, things got more complicated than I expected. Everyone knew about my love for fantasy romance. A few friends teased me. "Oh, fantasy romance is your thing. I've heard there's a lot of drama in those. Does he even know? I wonder how long he can handle this side of you." The social pressure was overwhelming. I knew he was listening from our phone call. When I got home, he was on the sofa, looking down, hands clenched tightly. I can't handle this. You're happy with them, and I feel so small, so insignificant," he admitted. I sighed, knowing this was the toughest challenge yet. This wasn't about books or compromise anymore. It was about judgment, social pressure, and personal insecurities. I sat down beside him, holding his hand, my voice gentle but firm. "Babe, I understand how you feel. But you have to remember, your worth isn't tied to my hobbies or what others think. You are enough, and I don't want to measure you by anyone else's standards." He looked up, tears brimming. "I know, but I just feel so small. Every time you're happy, I feel like I'm not enough." I took a deep breath, my heart heavy yet determined. "Babe, we have to face this. If we don't, fear will tear us apart. You have to trust me and trust our love. We've overcome so much already, this is just one more step." He lowered his head, shoulders trembling. I hugged him, feeling our hearts beat together. This was a pivotal moment where we had to choose: give up or walk together, accept each other or let go. The next day, I decided to host a private evening, just the two of us, to talk openly. I laid my books across the table, no longer hiding them, the soft desk lamp casting a warm glow on the pages. "How would you feel if we tried a completely new approach? No hiding, no worrying, just learning to accept and share our true feelings." He looked at each book, then at me, voice shaky but resolute. "I will try. I know you love this, and I don't want these feelings to come between us." We began a long conversation about emotions, insecurities, and social perception. I explained that reading didn't make me love him any less. It was part of who I am, and he needed to learn to accept that. He confessed that seeing me happy in my personal hobbies sometimes made him feel small, but he wanted to change. I want to learn to enjoy this with you, not feel inadequate. I'll be with you. I know it's hard, but if we get through this, our love will be stronger than ever. We sat quietly, listening to each other's heartbeats, savoring the rare calm after the emotional storm. This was the defining moment when we understood that choosing to accept each other was the most important decision in a relationship. The following week, things slowly began to shift. He no longer reacted negatively to the books, occasionally even leafing through a page and laughing at funny parts. I also learned to read more flexibly without disturbing him, sharing joy in a thoughtful way. One afternoon, sitting together on the armchair, sunlight streaming through the window, he looked at me, eyes full of determination. I know there are more challenges ahead, but I don't want to give up. I love you, and I'll learn to accept everything about you, even the things I used to find difficult. I smiled, placing my hand over his, feeling our hearts sink. Me too. We've faced the biggest pressure yet, and I believe everything will be better. As long as we walk together, nothing can break this love. At that moment, I realized that the biggest external pressures were the most important lessons forcing us to face, understand, and ultimately choose each other in all circumstances. The crisis was no longer fear. It was an opportunity to grow, love, and respect each other more than ever. After all the trials, crises, and pressures both from within and from the outside world, we finally found a deep sense of peace in our relationship. There was no hiding, no guilt, no lingering insecurity, only mutual understanding, acceptance, and the gentle rhythm of sharing life together. Every small habit, every routine, every moment spent side by side felt natural, grounding, and full of meaning. It was a weekend morning, and warm sunlight spilled through the apartment windows, illuminating every corner with a soft golden glow. I sat at the kitchen table, slowly sipping my coffee, watching him carefully arrange a few of my books on the small living room shelf. He paused for a moment, looked at me, and gave a small, genuine smile. You know, I never thought I'd get used to these books, he admitted, but now it feels okay. I laughed, reaching out to rest a hand on his shoulder. You're doing so well. I'm proud of you. The tension those romance novels once caused had disappeared. They had become a natural part of our shared life, neatly stacked on the shelf, visible without creating stress or discomfort. In fact, seeing him glance at them with curiosity rather than judgment now felt almost like a tiny celebration of how far we had come. We settled into our morning routine. Coffee, a few pages of reading, quiet conversation about the funny or absurd little events of daily life. Sometimes we laughed over the smallest things, like a cat video one of us found online, or a particularly dramatic line in a story, and the simplicity of these moments made them feel extraordinary. There was a calmness, a rhythm to life that we had never experienced before. One afternoon, I was reading a new chapter of my favorite fantasy romance when he sat beside me, lifting one of his own books off the shelf. I want to try reading a chapter too, he said, his tone both curious and quietly confident. So we read together. We shared smiles, chuckles, and gentle nudges whenever a scene became overly romantic or hilariously awkward. These weren't just playful moments, they were proof that we had learned to embrace each other's passions, turning what had once been a source of tension into a bridge between us. It was like learning a new language, the language of acceptance, patience, and shared joy. Over the next few weeks, the balancing of personal hobbies became second nature. I would read quietly, and he would spend time on his own interests. Whether it was reading the news, playing games, or working on small personal projects. Yet we always found small ways to connect, pointing out a humorous line in a story, sharing a laugh over a romantic mishap in my books, or tidying up the living room together, making sure both my novels and his belongings had their rightful place. One evening, while preparing dinner, he turned to me with a warmth in his voice that made me pause. "You know, I used to feel small when you read," he said softly. "But now, I feel happy seeing you happy. I've realized that love isn't about control. It's about walking together, side by side." I smiled, pressing my hand over his, feeling the subtle rhythm of his heartbeat. "Me too, and I know that all the challenges we've gone through weren't meaningless. They've helped us understand each other better, grow together, and truly love one another." Later, we sat down for dinner in our cozy apartment. Golden lights streamed through the windows, painting everything with warmth. The space was quiet yet comfortable, filled with the subtle sounds of cutlery, the occasional clink of a mug, and our low conversation. It was ordinary, and yet it felt extraordinary, the kind of peace you only find after weathering storms together. A few weeks later, we decided to invite friends over. This time, everything felt different. When our friends noticed the bookshelf, there were no teasing comments, no judgment, just smiles and lively conversation about the books. He sat beside me, laughing at the same jokes, relaxed and confident. "See," I whispered, "everyone sees it as normal now." He nodded gently, his eyes soft with understanding. "Yeah, I've learned that there's no reason to feel insecure or compare ourselves to others. We just need to walk together and respect each other." Evenings became a series of little rituals, our own ways of connecting and celebrating the mundane. Reading side by side, sharing funny storylines, talking through moments in the day, or even organizing small things around the apartment, all of it became part of our harmony. It was more than just peace. It was the joy of being truly known, accepted, and loved. One late afternoon, as the sun was dipping low and casting long, warm shadows across the balcony, we sat together with cups of tea. The world outside seemed to slow, the city's usual hum fading into the background. He turned to me, his voice soft and steady. "You know, this journey hasn't been easy, but I'm happy we've made it through. I love you, and now I feel truly at peace being with you." I took his hand, feeling the comforting beat of his pulse in mine. "I love you too. This peace, it's the result of everything we've endured. And I know that real love isn't about perfection, it's about understanding, accepting, and walking together through life." We sat in silence, watching the sunset slowly fade behind the buildings. Each moment stretched and lingered, filled with gratitude for the trials we had faced and the love that had grown stronger because of them. There was no pressure, no lingering tension, just harmony, connection, and an unspoken promise that whatever came next, we would face it together. During these weeks, I came to understand that every difficulty, every insecurity, every societal expectation had been an opportunity in disguise, an opportunity to learn patience, empathy, and how to love fully. We weren't perfect. We had arguments, moments of doubt, and times when frustration bubbled up. But through it all, we had chosen each other again and again, and that was what mattered most. Our story didn't end with some exaggerated, cinematic, happy moment. There were no dramatic declarations, no grand gestures. Instead, it ended with something infinitely more precious: peace. The kind of peace where both of us could be ourselves, fully enjoy our personal passions, and feel confident that love meant walking together, side by side, with respect, understanding, and laughter sprinkled along the way. That peace wasn't static, it was lived, moment by moment. A shared cup of coffee in the morning, a quiet laugh over a book, a hand held while watching the sunset. Every small action was a thread in the fabric of our life together, weaving a tapestry of comfort, trust, and affection. And in those threads, we found the most profound truth of all. Love isn't about control, perfection, or avoiding conflict. It's about choosing each other daily, embracing each other's flaws and quirks, and building a life where both hearts feel free, seen and cherished, sitting there in the gentle glow of the setting sun. I realized that the journey we had taken through fear, insecurity, compromise, and growth had been worth every tear, every doubt, every moment of struggle. We had learned how to truly walk together. We had learned that peace was not just an absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding, the willingness to accept, and the courage to remain open-hearted. And as the last light faded from the sky, we stayed there, hand in hand, hearts beating in quiet unison, knowing that this peace, this simple, profound, shared life was our happy ending. Not because everything was perfect, but because we had chosen each other, completely and unconditionally, every single day.